Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 9 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll be taking up is related to India-Europe relations, as both aim to establish more permanent staff-to-staff interactions including military personnel to boost joint operational effectiveness. The second article is related to SAARC, as the interim government head of Bangladesh has called for the revival of SAARC spirit. The third article is related to euthanasia, as the Supreme Court rejected a plea for passive euthanasia. The fourth article is related to La Nina, as it impacts the weather in India. The fifth article is related to Siang Upper Multipurpose project. Additionally, we'll be discussing 4 Prelims Snippets as well. Now, the first article is related to the India-Europe relations. The context behind it is that both India and Europe aim to establish more permanent staff-to-staff interactions, including between their military personnel, to boost the joint operational effectiveness. That is, they want to be effective at tackling the challenges that they face at sea, on land, or in cyberspace. So we will be discussing the areas of cooperation between India and Europe, the challenges that they face, as well as some issues and way forward. Now, this is important in GS2 under the topic bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interests. Before talking about the areas of cooperation between India and European Union, let's go back and understand the genesis of European Union also. The European Union is a political and economic union, a union of 27 member states of the European region, essentially established to ensure political and economic stability in the European region. And a single currency in the form of euro was also adopted, and this single currency is used among 19 member states. Essentially, the purpose is also to ensure that there is a single market where there are few trade barriers and there is a free movement of goods, services as well as capital between the European Union member states. Now, how did the European Union come into being? After the World War II, there was a need for reconstruction in the European region, and the European nation states agreed that they need to cooperate, and some nations came forward and established the European Economic Community in 1957. This was established through the Treaty of Rome. This was essentially to ensure that there is a single market which is created, and hence the economic reconstruction happens quickly. Then subsequently, the European Free Trade Association was also formed in 1960. This was to ensure that the trade can be conducted freely between the members of European Economic Community and the other nation states which were a member of the European Free Trade Association now. Subsequently, there were direct elections also which were conducted for the first time for the European Parliament, and then the Erasmus program came into being in 1987. This Erasmus program was to give scholarships for the students of European nations who wanted to study in another European nation. They were offered scholarships through the Erasmus program. And then finally, through the Maastricht Treaty in 1993, the European Union was finally formed formally, and it formalized the European Commission into the European Union, and it ensured that a single market is created whereby a free trade can be conducted between the member states. And then through the Treaty of Lisbon in 2007, it was put in place to ensure that the European Union is democratic, efficient, and it is made more transparent in its functioning, and the governance structures of the European Union are reformed. But subsequently in 2016, Britain voted for the exit from the European Union, and they finally left in 2020. Now, how has the relationship between India and European Union evolved? In the early 1990s, India was going through the process of liberalization. At the same time, the European Union was also expanding its membership. Therefore, there was a strengthening of cooperation between the two. Therefore, the cooperation agreement was signed in 1994 between India and European Union. And this agreement became the basis for the strategic partnership between India and European Union. Subsequently, the first India-European Union summit was also held in 2000, and then a joint action plan was put in place in 2005, which ensured that there was cooperation in the areas including trade, investment, education, as well as research. The cooperation areas were further expanded through the renewed dialogue, which was put in place through 2017, which included foreign policy, defense, and security architecture so that both can work coherently. Recently, India has also signed the Trade and Economic Partnership with the European Free Trade Association. The EFTA consists of 4 nation states of the European Union, including Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. Now, this TEPA agreement that India has signed will be benefiting India, as it will bring in FDI into India. $100 billion of fresh foreign direct investment will be coming into India, and it will also create 1 million jobs over the next 15 years due to these investments which will be coming from the European Union. Now, there is an exclusion list also. That is, there are certain sectors which have been identified where if the goods are imported into India, then no duty concessions will be provided. That is, the sectors such as dairy, soya, coal, gold imports, and some sensitive agricultural products. If they are imported into India, duty concessions will not be given. There is also a visa facilitation mechanism put in place for the Indian service firms. How will it be benefiting the Indian service firms? This will ensure easier visa norms so that the Indian service firms, they can use these countries which are members of EFTA as basis to tap the remaining countries in the European Union and to tap their market also. Also, the call for data exclusivity has been rejected by India. Data exclusivity is a process which is usually used in the case of pharmaceutical and clinical drug trials. For example, if a company conducts any drug trials to determine the safety or the efficacy of a drug, then that data, even if it is in the public domain, becomes exclusive for that company for a certain period of time, and within that time for which the data exclusivity is approved, no generic drug will be approved regarding that combination using that data. But the data exclusivity has been rejected in this agreement by India, so that it will be benefiting the Indian pharma companies also. Now, what are the cooperation areas broadly between India and the European Union? From the economic point of view, the trade is one of the major cooperation area between India and Europe. There has been a trade of about 88 billion euros in 2021. Therefore, India's largest trading partner is European Union, and for European Union, India is the 10th largest trading partner. In terms of investment, again, about 87 billion euros came into India as investment in 2020, and the European Union also supports in the infrastructure development in India. For example, in the energy sector, there is an India Clean Energy and Climate Partnership which has been put in place. In the transport sector, there are initiatives like city-to-city cooperation, sister cities network including Mumbai, Pune, Chandigarh, etc. From a political point of view, there is partnership including strategic partnership. It is to ensure that high-level political dialogue and cooperation happens, and there is cooperation in the areas including counter-terrorism, piracy, climate change, etc. And developmental assistance is also given by the European Union to India in the sectors including health, education, as well as agriculture. From a cultural and educational point of view, there is connect between the people-to-people ties. For example, through the Erasmus Plus program, scholarships are offered by the European Union to the students coming into Europe from India, which include full scholarships for the tuition fees as well as for their expenditure. In the technological sector, there is cooperation. For example, through the Horizon 2020, individual scientists are also granted funds through the European Research Council, and individual scientists can also gain from them. And there is the participation of India in the ITER fusion project also, which is to tap the nuclear energy through fusion in the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. And there is also a common agenda on migration and mobility put in place to ensure easier movements of skilled professionals between India and Europe. Now, what are the challenges between India and Europe relations? One, there is an imbalance in trade. That is, only about 1.9% of the European Union's total trade in goods in 2019 happened with India, whereas with China it is about 13%. And the BTIA talks, that is the Bilateral Trade and Investment Agreement, they have been stalled since long because there are certain demands by both European Union as well as India. The European Union demands regarding BTIA include that they want a reduction in the automobile tariffs. They want to export automobiles into India, for example, the German car makers including Volkswagen, Skoda, etc. And they want enhanced protection for the intellectual property. Because India gives compulsory licensing, for example, in the development of drugs, etc., to ensure that there is affordability which remains, they want more protection for the intellectual property rights as they want the royalty. And European Union wants lower taxes on the wines, spirits and similar products as there is import of wines and alcohol from Europe into India. And they want lesser regulations on the data localization in India, as India wants to put in place data localization norms, as data will be the new oil and it can be used to generate revenue. And they want safeguard for all items with the geographical indication. Whereas India's demands include that the rules for temporary relocation of skilled workers should be simplified, and the European Union should not resort to the non-technical trade barriers, including the sanitary and phytosanitary trade barriers and technical barriers to trade. India also wants the data secure status, so that India is not treated as a country which is not adhering to the intellectual property and it is not a hub of piracy, etc. Now, European Union also has certain concerns regarding the human rights in India, as the European Union also made adverse remarks at the time when India abrogated Article 370. Also, it made remarks when India put in place the Citizenship Amendment Act in 2019. The Brexit is another factor, as it may lead to uncertainties how the relationships between them will evolve. And India's focus on European Union has been largely as a trade bloc, that India sees European Union as a trade bloc, and regarding the political and security related relations and cooperation, India prefers to deal with the nations bilaterally. Now, what can be the way forward for the India-Europe relations? One, there should be a promotion of trade and investment. Both need to resolve the trade disputes and liberalize the trade between the two, and the investment should also be promoted. There should be a greater promotion of the two-way investment between both India and Europe. The political and security cooperation also needs to improve, as we can engage in intelligence sharing, joint training as well as capacity building to tackle the challenges including counter-terrorism, cyber-security, piracy, etc. Also, there is another factor, that is the Chinese factor. There has been a trend of authoritarian advance which has been seen in Asia, that is in the form of China's military adventurism in Asia. Earlier, Europe used to see this as a problem which is far away. But now, after the Ukraine war, there was a no limits partnership which was signed between China and Russia. Therefore, now this threat is knocking on the borders of Europe also. Therefore, they need to cooperate. Now, in the R&D sector also, there can be cooperation in the energy, health as well as the technology sharing regarding the advanced materials between India and Europe. The people-to-people exchanges can be improved, and the two can also cooperate in the multilateral fora including UN, WTO, G20, etc. Now there is a practice mains question also. Analyze India-Europe relations by discussing the key areas of cooperation and the major challenges faced, suggesting ways to strengthen the partnership. Please try to write it. Now the next article is related to SAARC. The context behind it is that the head of Bangladesh's interim government has called for a revival of the spirit of SAARC. So we will be discussing the challenges that SAARC faces, the failures that it has faced, as well as a few suggestions. This is important in GS2 under the topic bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India. Now, SAARC was established in 1985. Its headquarters as well as the secretariat are located in Kathmandu. It consists of 8 members including Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Maldives. These 8 members put together, they account for about 3% of the global area, 23.4% of the world population, and also they contribute to about 6.66% of the world's GDP when measured in terms of purchasing power parity. There are certain observers also for the SAARC. The observers include Australia, China, European Union, Iran, Japan, South Korea, Mauritius, Myanmar as well as USA. And various countries have been trying to become the full member states also for SAARC, that there are calls for expansion of SAARC including from China as well as Myanmar. Now what are the principles on which SAARC functions? SAARC functions on the principles of sovereign equality, territorial integrity, political independence, non-interference in the internal affairs of other states, as well as for mutual benefit. The SAARC region accounts for about 44% of the world's poor population as per a report by the World Bank. And the intra-regional trade in the SAARC region, that is the trade within the SAARC countries among themselves, is only about 5% of the total foreign trade of all the SAARC countries. Whereas the intra-regional trade in the ASEAN region among the ASEAN countries is 25%. Now, how has SAARC failed? What are the pain points regarding SAARC? One, ever since the inception of the SAARC, there has been a suspicion and mistrust among the member nations. Initially, it was envisioned by General Ziaur Rahman. Now, General Ziaur Rahman was seen to be associated with the West, and hence India was wary that is it an American mechanism to counter the Soviet influence? That was the time of the Cold War politics also. Therefore, initially India was wary of joining such an agreement, such a mechanism. But subsequently India joined it. But even after the formation of SAARC in 1985, its functioning has not been up to the mark. For example, the summits of SAARC have been postponed 11 times in the last 3 decades. The implementation of SAFTA, the South Asian Free Trade Agreement, has not been up to the mark. The South Asian Free Trade Agreement came into effect in 2006. But despite putting in place the Free Trade Agreement, the intra-regional trade among the SAARC countries remains only about 5%. Even there have been objections by various member countries regarding the initiatives that various countries in SAARC have proposed. For example, the SAARC satellite project, which was proposed by India, it was abandoned following the objection from Pakistan in 2016. Likewise, the motor vehicle agreement between the SAARC countries, it would have ensured regional connectivity, better trade opportunities and lesser cost of trade between the countries of SAARC. It was also stalled despite India's push for it. It was stalled due to Pakistan's objections again. There is also lack of consensus on the threat perceptions. That is, for example, regarding the definition of terror, regarding the threat from terror, there is difference in opinions, difference in perceptions among the SAARC countries themselves. There is lack of agreement. Plus, there is another factor of asymmetry. The other countries of the SAARC region, they see India as a big brother. There is asymmetry in terms of the political, economic, or even the strategic prowess between India and the other countries which are all smaller than India. And the countries of SAARC, they rather resort to bilateral agreements, bilateral negotiations. This trend of bilateralism puts the SAARC on the back burner. Plus, there is a shortage of resources in the region. Almost all the countries, they are facing an acute shortage of resources in the SAARC, and therefore they are reluctant to increase their contributions to SAARC for its effective functioning. Now, there have been certain initiatives, certain achievements of SAARC also. For example, the SAARC Development Fund was put in place. Through the SAARC Development Fund, the funds are allocated to the member countries through 3 windows, that is, for the purposes including social, economic and for infrastructure building. For this, the funds are given to the SAARC member countries, and it also helps in the policy making as well as implementation of the projects. The South Asian University was also put in place. Through the Article 7 of the Agreement for the South Asian University, the member countries of SAARC are mandated to recognize the degrees which are awarded by the South Asian University at par with the university degrees which are given in the respective countries. The South Asian Regional Standards Organization was also put in place. This organization is to ensure cooperation in the metrology, accreditation as well as the conformity assessment of the various mechanisms or measures put in place. The SAARC Arbitration Council was also put in place to ensure the resolution of disputes and to increase cooperation among the member countries. The SAARC Disaster Management Center was also established at Gandhinagar in Gujarat. This gives policy advice, capacity building as well as training to the member countries of SAARC to ensure that the disaster is managed effectively and prevented. The South Asian Free Trade Agreement also provides for the reciprocity among the member nations, elimination of barriers to free trade and to promote fair competition among the member countries. But still, the functioning of SAARC has been questionable. Now, what can be the way ahead to promote the cooperation in SAARC? One, we can go the ASEAN way. The ASEAN countries, while cooperating among each other, they focus on the issue-wise cooperation. That is, they focus on economic cooperation first. And if some member countries do not agree with certain agreements or the cooperation areas, then an agreement is put in place between the rest of the countries. Then we can form the conflict conciliation groups for the SAARC region to ensure the conciliation mechanisms, and we can resolve the bilateral disputes first. There is a natural alternative also which has emerged in the form of the BIMSTEC. The BIMSTEC consists of Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand and Nepal as well as Bhutan. Now, there is a practice question also. Assess the relevance of SAARC by evaluating its major achievements and shortcomings and propose measures to enhance its effectiveness in promoting regional cooperation and development. Now, the next article is related to euthanasia. This is important as the Supreme Court has rejected a plea for passive euthanasia in India. So, we'll discuss the case laws on euthanasia as well as the arguments in favor of legalization of euthanasia and the arguments against it. This is important in GS2 in governance and also in GS4 as it is an ethical issue as well. Now, what is euthanasia? Euthanasia can be active euthanasia or passive euthanasia. It is the process of taking away one's life. Active euthanasia means that you are taking up specific actions to take a patient's life, to end a patient's life. You are actively taking it away. Whereas passive euthanasia means that you are withdrawing the life support mechanism so that the disease which the patient is battling, that itself is taking away the patient's life, and you are not actively taking away a patient's life, because the life support mechanisms, if they are withdrawn, naturally the patient shall die because they are on life support. Now, this is usually recommended for the patients who are in a vegetative state, permanently vegetative state, for example, in a coma for decades altogether. Now, what are the constitutional provisions regarding this? Article 21 in the Indian Constitution provides for the right to life and personal liberty. That is, no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except as per the procedure established by law. And in the case Puttaswamy versus Union of India judgment also, it was held by the Supreme Court that there is a right to live with dignity enshrined within Article 21. Through this right also follows the right to privacy also, which was held in the judgment. Now, what is the issue if we practice euthanasia? What are the legal provisions which will be violated? One is the section 309 of the Indian Penal Code. Section 309 provides for the attempt to suicide, which is also considered as a crime, and the person who attempts suicide, he will be punished. Additionally, there is the section 306 of IPC, which provides for the crime and punishment for the abetment to suicide. If the doctor goes for euthanasia, he can also be booked under section 306 for abetting the suicide of a patient under the section 306 of IPC. But the Law Commission in 241st report observed that the informed decision, if taken by the patient, shall allow the nature to have its course, and therefore there shall be no application of section 309 or section 306 of the IPC in such cases. Now, is it practiced worldwide? Yes. The most people who die by assisted suicide throughout the world include Canada, Netherlands, Belgium and United States. Now, what are the case laws related to euthanasia in India? In P. Ratinam versus Union of India, the court held that the right to life, which is guaranteed under Article 21, can be said to include the right to not live a life that is forced upon someone. That is, a person cannot be forced upon to live. Therefore, section 309 of IPC was held to be unconstitutional. That is, attempt to suicide was held to be no longer a crime through the P. Ratinam versus Union of India, but the situation has changed again. In Gyan Kaur versus State of Punjab, the court said that the right to die, if any, is inherently inconsistent with the right to life. That is, you cannot say that right to die is also included within the right to life which is provided under Article 21, because death is also inconsistent with life. Therefore, it held that both euthanasia and assisted suicide are not lawful in India, although the court made remarks regarding the patients who are in a permanently vegetative state. Through the Aruna Schonborg case, in the Aruna Ramachandra Schonborg versus Union of India, the Supreme Court observed that passive euthanasia should be permitted, but it should be permitted with safeguards. It should be permitted when the patient is in a persistent vegetative state, that is, he or she cannot function, and it is ultimately for the court to decide as parens patriae. That is, like a parent, it is the duty of the court to decide what is in the best interest of the patient. Now, this will be taking into account the opinions of the caretakers of the patient, the medical condition of the patient, the opinions of doctors, etc., and adequate safeguards were put in place through this case. In Common Cause versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court again said that the terminally ill patients can be allowed for passive euthanasia. The terminally ill patients where there is no hope for revival, then the priority shall be given to advance directive or a living will if it was created. For example, if a person gives a directive in advance because he has an apprehension that there may come a stage when he will be in a vegetative state, then he can form a living will or an advance directive saying that if the situation comes to this point, then there should be euthanasia which should be done upon me, and there should be a right to self-determination for the patient. Now, what are the arguments in favor of the legalization of euthanasia? One, there is the argument of the autonomy of the individuals, the right to self-determination. For example, John Stuart Mill also used to argue for the liberty and autonomy of the individual. There is one school of thought which says that it will give relief from the suffering which the patient has to endure. And from a utilitarian perspective, from Jeremy Benthamite perspective also, it will ultimately give relief to the patient only. and the dignity of the individual should also be respected. It is also not fair to allow someone, or rather force someone who is in a vegetative state, to permanently live based on the life support mechanisms only. The quality of life should also be considered, as the human beings deserve a good quality of life. Plus, it will ensure that the practice of euthanasia is regulated. There are no cases where it is conducted under the table, or the practices which are taken up, they are safe. And there is a reduction of the healthcare costs, again from a utilitarian perspective, as the resources which are utilized for the life care support systems of the patient can be utilized elsewhere, although this is a myopic point of view. And it will provide the psychological relief for the families also, who are in a perpetual hope of recovery. There are certain arguments against legalization of euthanasia also. One is that it will provide sanctity to life. That is, there should be value which should be attached to life, and life is invaluable, as once a person dies, he cannot be revived. And there is a potential for abuse also, that what if in the name of euthanasia further there is a killing of people which happens. Plus, we are on a slippery slope for this. The slippery slope here means that in future, if we legalize passive euthanasia now, there will be calls for more permissions for euthanasia, and there will be calls for liberal norms for euthanasia also. Now, there is a practice question also. Evaluate the ethical and legal dimensions of euthanasia by discussing major arguments in favor of and against its legalization, citing relevant case laws. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to La Nina. The context behind it is that La Nina is delayed and it impacts India's weather. So, we'll discuss La Nina as well as the impacts of El Nino and La Nina on India as well as globally. This is important in GS1 under geography. So, let's understand a few basics first. Whenever there is availability of warm current or warm sea surface temperature at any location, the pressure usually there is low and the air rises at that location. If there is the availability of cold current at any location, the sea surface temperature is cold and the pressure is high, and it is a zone of subsidence. The air subsides at that location. Now, let's discuss the normal conditions first in the Pacific Ocean. In the normal conditions, there is the availability of cold current near the Peruvian coast. This cold current brings the water from deeper ocean, and it is an upwelling zone, and the sea surface temperature is cold near the Peruvian coast. Whereas the sea surface temperature near the Australian coast, the East Australian coast, is warm. The temperature in the western equatorial Pacific Ocean is warm and the pressure is low, and the air is rising at this location. The air travels towards the eastern Pacific Ocean and it subsides near the Peruvian coast. Near the sea surface, the air travels back towards the East Australian coast. This becomes a circle. This we call it as the Walker circulation. This is the normal condition. The air, when it is rising near the East Australian coast, it also brings rainfall near the east coast of Australia. And when it is moving towards the eastern equatorial Pacific Ocean, and then it moves towards the Indian Ocean also. Now, during the times of La Nina, this Walker circulation is strengthened. That is, there is more availability of cold current near the Peruvian coast, and the pressure here is even higher. There is more subsidence of air at the Peruvian coast, and there is more upwelling zone which is available near the Peruvian coast, and the air is rising near the East Australian coast, and there is more rainfall which happens at the eastern coast of Australia, as well as there is more availability of rain near the Indian Ocean also. We'll understand that also how. Now, during the time of El Nino, the reverse happens. That is, there is no availability of warm sea surface temperature near the East Australian coast. Here, rather, it becomes the zone of subsidence, as the availability of warm sea surface temperature is not there on the East Australian coast, rather it is nearer to the central equatorial Pacific Ocean or nearer to the eastern equatorial Pacific Ocean, that is near the coast of Peru. Therefore, what happens is the water circulation becomes weaker and weaker, and rather the air subsides near the east coast of Australia and the air rises near the central equatorial Pacific Ocean, or rather nearer to the Peruvian coast. Now this ensures that there is lesser and lesser rainfall near the east coast of Australia, and rather there is rainfall near the Peruvian coast, which is usually having desert-like conditions in the La Nina phase or in the normal conditions also. This is not beneficial for either Peru or even the Indian subcontinent also, because during the times of El Nino, the Peruvian region experiences rather rainfall. It leads to lesser breeding of fishes, lesser availability of cold current near the Peruvian coast. Now, what is the impact of El Nino? It has adverse impact on the food chain, because during the times of La Nina or in the normal conditions, there is the availability of cold current near the coast of Peru. This is the zone of upwelling. When the upwelling is happening, when the water is coming up from the depths of ocean towards the sea surface, it is bringing nutrients along with it. Now these nutrients are useful for the breeding of fish. Now during the time of El Nino, the cold current is not there near the Peruvian coast. It is no more a zone of upwelling. Therefore, there is lesser availability of nutrients, lesser breeding of fishes. It affects the food chain also adversely. Also, during the times of El Nino, there is a reversal of the currents, the cold currents and warm currents, and the water transports the species from their natural habitats towards elsewhere, causing an adverse impact. Plus the temperatures of various regions, they are also changing and the reversal happens. For example, during the times of El Nino, there is rather floods near the Southern American coast or the floods near the southeastern USA, etc., which are usually regions of drought whenever there is the condition of La Nina, etc. Now, there is an impact of La Nina also. For La Nina, on the Indian monsoon, there is a positive impact, because during the times of La Nina, the water circulation is strengthened and the air is rising near the eastern coast of Australia. That air, when it rises, it travels both towards the eastern Pacific Ocean also and towards the Indian Ocean also. And when that air is coming towards the Indian Ocean, then it subsides near Madagascar. And near Madagascar, it becomes the high pressure zone, the zone of subsidence. Now during the times of summer, there is the availability of low pressure over the Indian subcontinent also. Therefore, the air comes easily from the zone of subsidence from Madagascar towards India, bringing rainfall along with it. Therefore, the prevalence of La Nina in the Pacific Ocean positively impacts the Indian monsoon and there is more rainfall. Whereas the reverse happens during the times of the El Nino. And globally also, there is an overall positive impact of La Nina on all the regions approximately. For example, near the coast of Peru, there is availability of more fishes, and even there is more rainfall near the eastern coast of Australia and lesser desert-like conditions there. Now, the next article is related to Upper Siang Multipurpose Project. The context behind it is that Arunachal Pradesh government employees who joined dam protests, they have been served show cause notices. So we'll understand the need for this Upper Siang Multipurpose Project. This is important in GS3 under the topic environment. This project is a counter contingency plan of India to counter the Chinese plan. China wants to transport the water of Yarlung Tsangpo, that is the Brahmaputra river as it is known in China, to the northern regions of China. The northern regions of China are usually drought prone, therefore it wants to take the water of Brahmaputra there. Also it wants to construct dams there. For example, it plans to construct a 60 gigawatt dam at Medog on the Yarlung Tsangpo. It is near Arunachal Pradesh only. It is essentially to also ensure carbon neutrality. because it wants to generate hydropower, that is generate power by reducing its carbon emissions, and it wants to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060 also. These dams will also be utilized to utilize the fresh water in the water scarce southern China. It has also been reported that it will divert the water of Brahmaputra towards the arid regions in the northern China, and there are already constructions which are underway at the Gyatsa hydro project and at the Jiksu hydro project also. This dam, which is now planned at the Medog, it will be adversely impacting the lower riparian states, for example Arunachal Pradesh, because China will be storing water when there will be lesser rainfall. It will lead to lesser availability of the free flow of water in the Arunachal Pradesh and Assam region. And Arunachal Pradesh and Assam are heavily dependent on the water from the Brahmaputra. And this diversion of water could also strain the agricultural needs of the northeastern region of India. This mismanagement by the usage of dams by China, it may lead to underflows and overflows. For example, during the times of lesser rainfall, there will be less availability of water in Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, and during the times of more rainfall, it will lead to artificial flooding also because of sudden release of water from the dams built on Yarlung Sangpo by China. These dams may also cause losses and difficulties not only to India but also to Bangladesh. Now, what is the need for this Upper Siang multipurpose project? One, the large volumes of water that China is planning to store at the Great Bend project. This will be causing artificial floods during monsoon in Arunachal Pradesh and Assam. And additionally, there will be lesser lean season flows during the times of lesser rainfall, and it will affect the techno-economic feasibility of the Lower Siang hydroelectric project. Therefore, we want to build the hydroelectric project at the Upper Siang region, because that way we will be able to store water also and control the release of water, controlling the artificial floods which may happen in Arunachal Pradesh and Assam if the Upper Siang multipurpose project is not built. Plus, it will be helping the economic development and infrastructure of Arunachal Pradesh also. For example, it will generate employment, it will encourage fish breeding in Arunachal Pradesh, it will improve the water transport, water sports, as well as revenue generation from the hydropower. From the map, we can look at the plan of China to transport the waters from the southern rivers in China towards the northern rivers. It is building three routes: the eastern route, the middle route, and the western route. The eastern and middle routes are already functional at some places in China. The western route is not yet functional, through which China plans to divert the water of Yarlung Sangpo towards the northern arid regions of China, which we need to counter through the Upper Siang multipurpose project. But there are certain concerns for this also. One, the environmental and social impact assessment should be done. Although the Forest Conservation Act gives certain exemptions, that is, the strategic projects, if undertaken within 100 kilometers of the borders, they are not required to conduct any environmental impact assessment, etc., but it should be done. And it may lead to the threat of ecosystems and biodiversity, as some species may be affected because of the construction of the dams. Additionally, there will be a displacement of the indigenous people residing there. There are concerns of displacement of the Adi tribe which resides in that region in Arunachal Pradesh. Now we'll be taking up 4 prelim snippets also. The first topic is related to technical textiles. Technical textiles are the textile materials and products which are manufactured primarily for their technical performance rather than for textile uses. It is done for their functional properties rather than the aesthetic characteristics. Some of the usages are also seen in the image. As you can see, the types can include agrotech, build tech, cloth tech, geotech, home tech, mobile tech, meditech, pro tech, sports tech, etc. That is, they can be used, for example, when we look at the cloth tech, they can be used for clean room garments, geotech for erosion prevention, med tech for wound care, gauges, etc. Now, in technical textiles, India accounts for 6% of the world market, and the annual growth rate for the technical textiles in India is 12%, whereas it is only 4% in the world. The penetration level in India for the technical textiles is low. It is about 5 to 10%, whereas in the advanced countries it is about 30 to 70%. Therefore, the government came up with the National Technical Textiles Mission, which has 4 major components, including the research and development, that is to promote the development of fibers made of carbon, nylon 66, glass, aramid, etc. It also promotes the market development, promoting user awareness for the technical textiles and promoting exports to get more markets for the technical textile industry of India, and also give training and skill development for the sector. Now, the next article is related to gender apartheid. Gender apartheid is a term which is used in the context of the morality law which was put in place by the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. The Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls have tried to define the term gender apartheid. They say that it can be termed as the institutionalized regime of systematic discrimination, oppression and domination by one group on the basis of gender, the domination of one group over another. Now, it has been seen in the form of the decrees which are founded on the Taliban's interpretation of Islamic law. They give decrees based upon the control of the attires that the women can wear, for example, covering their entire body with a veil, or restricting the free movement of women, or restricting their access to education, professional opportunities, etc. Recently, the Taliban regime in Afghanistan brought a morality law also. Through this, they put even more restrictions, saying that the women's body should be under a veil, the entire body, at all times when the woman is in public. Even the voice of woman has been termed as intimate. Therefore, a woman cannot sing, recite or even read loudly at public places. Therefore, it has been termed by the rights organizations that women have been rendered merely faceless, voiceless shadows in Afghanistan. A similar call is there in Iran also. Iran has proposed a bill that support the family by promoting the culture of chastity and hijab, where it has approved the new punishments for the women who do not wear hijab or cover their body with a veil. Now, there are calls for protest against this also. The next article is related to Yetina Hall project. This is for the drinking water supply. It is an integrated drinking water supply project. It will be done in 2 stages. The first stage has been done. It enables the pumping of water to the Vani Vilas Sagar. In the second stage, it will enable the pumping of water to Tumkuru. So essentially, we will be diverting the water of Netravati river. There will be the diversion of the west flowing river water to meet the drinking water needs of 7 parched districts in the southern Karnataka region. Now, this water will be taken from the 4 tributaries of Netravati river, including Yetina Hall, Kudomine Hall, Keri Hall and Hongade Halla in the Sakleshpur Taluk. It will be diverted. But there are certain concerns regarding this project. That is, the pumping of water to the height and then storing it in a tank. It will be done in the eco-sensitive Western Ghats region, plus the quantum of water which is said to be extra from the tributaries of Netravati which will be taken, it is also questioned. The next article is related to multi-drug resistant TB treatment. A new regimen has been prescribed and approved by the Health Ministry. It will be a regimen of 4 drugs including bedaquiline, pretomanid, linezolid and moxifloxacin. We have a TB elimination target by 2025, 5 years ahead of the global target under the Sustainable Development Goals. The traditional treatments, they can take up to 20 months and they have severe side effects also, whereas the new treatment regimen which has been approved will have lesser side effects and it will take about 6 months only. And India has also the world's largest TB laboratory network, which includes 7,767 rapid molecular testing facilities, and 87 culture and drug susceptibility testing laboratories. The new treatment regimen has been proven to be safe and more effective and a quicker treatment option than the previous MDR treatment procedure, and it will bring down the treatment time to about 6 months only from the earlier duration of 18 to 24 months. It is found to be cheaper for both health systems as well as patients. Thank you.